Aisha radiallahu anha, the famous narration that the Prophet ﷺ saw me with the siwak, or saw Abdurrahman ibn Abu Bakr with the siwak, so I took the siwak and I softened it for the Prophet ﷺ, and then I gave it to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and that's when that's when the Prophet ﷺ said the last words, Bali Rafiq al-A'la, rather the highest companionship. Meaning, the angel of death always asks permission from the prophets and messengers prior to taking their soul. Something which is an honor for the prophets and messengers, only for the prophets and messengers. And so he was asked, do you want to stay? He said, Bali Rafiq al-A'la, rather the highest companionship. And then the Prophet ﷺ had passed away. And this was on Monday, the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, in the 11th year of the Hijrah, at the age of 63 years old. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was in complete denial. And he would tell the companions who were gathering in the masjid, because they're hearing the news, he would tell them he has not died, rather he has gone to his Lord, just as Musa went up to Allah, or spoke to Allah for 40 days, went to Allah for 40 days and had the conversation when he went to the valley of Tuwa. So he'll be coming back, and he would threaten people with his sword. He had his sword unsheathed. In typical Umar radiallahu anhu fashion. He's upset, he's emotional, and he's not accepting the reality of what's happened. And this, again, it shows us the love of the Messenger of Allah that the companions had, that they couldn't believe that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. And it's like, for example, loved ones that we have, elderly loved ones that we have, parents, grandparents, uncles, etc. And we have a huge amount of love for them because they're close to us, that even if they were to pass away, it will still be a shock. I mean, no one's going to be thinking, oh, well, he was old and it's going to happen eventually. No one thinks like this. There's still a level of surprise and shock and sadness that he's gone. And it was the same with the Prophet ﷺ, because a lot of them were probably assuming that he would recover. Even Abu Bakr radiallahu anh thought he was getting better. They thought, yeah, our loved ones get sick, what do we think they're going to die? Somebody gets sick, an elderly person gets sick. We don't assume straight away that they're going to die. We think it's an illness, hopefully inshallah they'll recover. Anyone gets sick, we think they'll get better, they'll recover. So the same was the case with the companions and Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu hears the news, and he goes to the house of the Prophet ﷺ, enters upon the Prophet ﷺ, removes the garment covering the Prophet's face, and he kisses the Prophet ﷺ on the forehead, and he begins to cry because he realizes the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. And he says, may my mother and father be sacrificed for you, O Messenger of Allah. Allah will not combine two deaths upon you. As for the death that was decreed for you, you have just died. Meaning Allah has decreed what was going to happen. Allah will not combine two deaths upon you. And he was refuting the claim of Umar that the death of the Prophet ﷺ hadn't happened. Because Umar radiallahu anh was saying he's gone to Allah, he's going to come back. But Abu Bakr said this isn't the state, this isn't the case, this isn't actually what's happened. So he comes out of the house, goes to the masjid. Umar radiallahu anh is still speaking in a fit of rage, anger, emotional. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh says to him, Umar, sit down. And again, you need to understand the scenario. Companions are there, they don't know what's going on. Umar is there, shouting, with a sword in his hand, threatening to cut people's heads off. Whether or not he had a sword, Allah knows best, in fact, but threatening to cut people's heads off if they say he's passed away. No one's saying anything to Umar, because it's Umar radiallahu anh. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh straight away comes in and says, Umar, sit down. Like, take a seat, you calm down. No fear whatsoever for Umar radiallahu anh. Umar radiallahu anh doesn't listen, he's still emotional, and then he moves away from Umar radiallahu anh and starts giving a sermon, and the companions leave Umar and they make their way to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And this is symbolism, a clear sign that the companions had this level of respect for Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and he was of a higher status than Umar radiallahu anh. Otherwise, if somebody comes and says, guys, follow me, and you're going to think, well, why would I follow you? Who are you? And if it was somebody who you loved and respected, and he was popular and well known and a righteous person, you would follow him because you would trust him. And so you would want to listen to what he has to say. And of course, all of these people are companions and we love them all. But Abu Bakr radiallahu anh had this higher status, and this is an example of his status. And then he gave the famous sermon من كان يعبد محمدا فإن محمدا قد مات. Whoever used to worship Muhammad, then Muhammad has passed away. And whoever used to worship Allah, then Allah is ever living and He will never die. And he recited the ayah, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. What is Muhammad except a messenger? Messengers have come before him. أَفَإِن مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقلبتم على أعقابكم. If he dies, or he passes away, or is killed, will you then turn on your heels and run away as disbelievers and abandon the deen? Some of the companions, they said, it was as if we had heard this ayah for the first time. Because sometimes you read an ayah and you learn something new from the ayah. The Prophet ﷺ has just passed away. So it hits differently. The ayah hits differently. And so they were reciting the ayah the whole day, because of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh reminding them. Umar radiallahu anh, he said, I fell to the ground when I heard Abu Bakr radiallahu anh recite these ayat. And again, these are all examples of the status of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh amongst the companions, his steadfastness, him being firm upon the deen during this very difficult time. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ has just passed away. You know, it's when a scholar or an imam or a respected person passes away who was spearheading, things and projects, and he was at the forefront and he was so influential, people are at a loss. They don't know what to do. Straight away, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh realized there needs to be stability. And then, of course, there was a gathering by the Ansar to discuss who was going to be the leader. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh gathers the news that they're meeting at the gathering place, and so he makes his way with Umar radiallahu anh. Umar radiallahu anh narrates the story, and he says, we left intending to go and meet them, and when we went there, we listened to what the Ansar had to say about who the leader should be. They were hoping that the leader would be, or expecting that it would be from the Ansar, because they're from Medina. The Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. They just assumed that the person who would be the next leader would be somebody from Medina. They would just assumed it was the most common sense thing. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was there, Umar radiallahu anh was there. After they spoke, Umar radiallahu anh wanted to get up and speak. And he had made notes in his head about what he wanted to say, points that he wanted to make. So he said, I wanted to stand up and speak, but I was told to stay seated by Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Again, him showing his authority. And then he said, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh then spoke. He was more forbearing than I was, meaning he was more calm and patient with them than I would have been. And everything that I thought of saying to them, everything that I had in my mind, he said them in a similar or a better manner. Everything I wanted to say, he said it in a better way. And he would tell them, you are the people of the Ansar. You are worthy of all the good things you have said about yourselves. Nonetheless, only the people of Quraysh have a right to be the Khulafa, because the status of the Muhajirun is higher than the status of the Ansar, because of them being the earlier Muslims and then going through those trials and tribulations. And of course, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh gave them the choice. He said, I have two people with me, Abu Ubaidah Amr ibn Jarrah and Umar ibn Khattab. Choose whomsoever you wish to choose from amongst the two. Umar radiallahu anh, he said people began to argue and voices were being raised about what to do in this situation. It was one of the first trials between the companions after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Umar radiallahu anh, he said, in order to quell their disagreements, this was getting serious now. There might be there's two parties opening up here, two groups. He doesn't want this to happen. So he says, in order to quell the disagreement, I said, extend your hand, O Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh put out his hand, and Umar radiallahu anh pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. Straight away, just pledged his allegiance. And everyone's watching. Abu Ubaidah is there, the second person that was being chosen, nominated for leadership, and he does the same thing. He says, okay, khalas, you've pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr, makes sense. Very interesting, Abu Bakr never pledged allegiance himself, or asked people to choose him as a leader. Very interesting. He didn't want to be the leader himself. Abu Ubaidah then pledges allegiance to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. When this happens, the Muhajirun also pledge allegiance, after which the Ansar also pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, when he gave his speech, he said that, verily you have chosen me, I never wanted to be the leader. It was something I never wanted. I never looked to be the leader. And there are narrations which speak about Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh being somebody who would tell people, don't look to be a leader in the future. Because it was obviously something that he never wanted himself. And, this really shows us the people skills of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. The way he would speak to people. When he speaks to the Ansar, he's praising the Ansar. For example, in school, when you're a teacher, they say, Parents' Day, when Parents' Day comes, and they ask you, how is my child doing? Maybe you guys can, find out next time you go to Parents' Evening if they use this tactic. They call it the compliment sandwich. You guys know what a compliment sandwich is? So you say the child he's very well behaved, but he can get distracted, but he does his homework regularly. So you just sandwiched a criticism, but you put two compliments, between the criticism. The problem is when you can't find any compliments, that's the only problem. But otherwise, it's a good technique because you're saying good things about the student, positive things. And, it makes them listen. Straight away going into criticism is helpful. Sometimes they become defensive. It's not a good quality to have when you're speaking about others. It's always good to praise. The Prophet ﷺ himself would use this tactic, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu also did this. And this is essentially how Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu became the leader of the Muslims after Umar radiallahu anhu and the other companions pledged allegiance. Ali ibn Abi Talib, another issue is about Ali ibn Abi Talib. Did he pledge allegiance? Ali ibn Abi Talib pledged allegiance after the other companions. Why was this the case? Because his wife was sick. Fatima radiallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, was sick. They say she passed away a month or two after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And this was a prophecy by the Prophet ﷺ himself. He said that you're going to be the first one from my family to die after me. And because he was so busy with taking care of his wife, he never pledged allegiance straight away. And so when things were settled, and also on top of this actually, he was the one dealing with the issues relating to the death of the Prophet ﷺ also. When somebody passes away, the loved ones, the family members are very busy. They don't have time, to do other things. So he was dealing with the affairs of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ after he had passed away. And so he pledged allegiance after the fact. And this whole issue of there being animosity and hatred between the companions, or they say, for example, the companions forced Ali to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. It doesn't make any sense. Does it make sense for a companion to force another companion to do something? What do you know about the companions? They were known for their bravery and their courage. It doesn't make any sense that you would force a companion and he wasn't somebody who would speak his mind. Or on top of the fact that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was pledged allegiance to by Ali. Ali radiallahu anh had children called Abu Bakr and Umar. If there was an issue, why would you name your own sons after your enemies? He had children called Abu Bakr and Umar. So again, this issue doesn't make any sense. And this is essentially the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq beginning.